Hello everyone, this is FIDE Master Victor Neustroyev. Let me bring my microphone a little bit closer. So today I prepared a mastermind for you. I'm going to explain what I do myself to punish chess players who don't play their openings properly. That's why I called it punishing opening rebels. However, it doesn't obligatory mean that after by the end of the webinar you will defeat any player who doesn't play the opening properly, but you will definitely learn the principles and the concept that you should have in mind when you see that your opponent is doing something really wrong in the chess game. Now please let me know if there are any technical issues, how the internet connection is, what about the sound and video quality, because somehow today there is no technical mistakes and everything works smoothly. I am pleasantly surprised with it. Yeah, perfect. Okay, I should also, well, we will wait for maybe 2 minutes. A few more people will join us. Okay, so all good on Twitch. Okay. So we are going to start with some basics first. Okay. Well, actually, I'm sure you see the board, and I'm going to share the game that I played against Barolyub Zlatanovic, International Master Barolyub Zlatanovic, who is also working for our online coaching school, chesslance.com, and that game we played in 2019. He didn't play the opening properly. I almost managed to punish him for that, got a strong advantage, but later during the game made several mistakes and then lost. However, let's start and let's talk about basics, and we start with something really simple. We start with e4, e5. Knight f3, knight c6. Well, bishop c4, and you know that some amateurs here who don't want to play against fried liver attack, so with knight takes f7 variations, who also doesn't want this, and so on, they play h6 in advance. What's wrong with h6? I'm sure you understand. Well, when you see that your opponent plays something weird, you should understand. Well, actually, you have two options. First option is to keep developing pieces as usual, and maybe later you take advantage of this weird move. And the second option is to think what's wrong with this exact move and why strong chess players usually play something else instead of, for example, h6. However, to be able to do that, you should understand the openings you play. For example, here h6 does prevent knight g5, but at the same time, this is a tempo loss. Nobody plays with the edge pawn in the very beginning of the game, and the best way to punish your opponent in case if he lags with his development is to open the position in the center. So how do you understand open the position in the center? It means that you should open the files, the central files or the files that are close to the center. It's either the D, the E, sometimes the F and C files as well. Yes, you may clear the file fully, or you can just clear the half of that file. So the best reaction to tempo losses is to open the position by initiating a pawn exchange in the center with d4. What happens then? Well, most likely they have to take. For example, if d6 is played, who can tell me what's wrong with this move? So I'm looking for your comments and suggestions. So what's wrong with this? D takes e5 and the queen exchange. Yeah, D takes e5, D takes e5, queen exchange, and then if the king takes, there is f7 hanging. If the knight takes, it's e5 hanging. So that's why they have to take. What should you do now? Well, you may take. This is a natural move. However, it's important not only to open the position right away, but make sure that you have a good coordination of your pieces. So you can take later. Let's first speed up our development with castling. What do people play here? Well, most of club players will continue with bishop c5, which is a mistake. Who can tell me what's wrong with bishop c5 move? Maybe you know? Okay, so bishop c5 is a wrong move because of c3 that can be played. Yes, thank you guys for suggesting this move. Yes, it's c3 exactly. Well, if they take, you can. If they push the pawn forward, then you can continue with b4, then initiate some activity on that side. But most people take, and if they take, you have queen to d5 to objects. Well, you can't play queen d5 right away. If you do it right now, it's queen e7. That's why instead you should first take on f7, king f7, and then continue with queen d5, taking on c5. If the king moves to the light square, you continue with a check, forcing him to go to the dark square, after which you take on c5 with another check. g6 here doesn't work, you just take, and if king goes there, you gain a rook. If king goes there, you can still take the bishop. So queen h5, king goes to a dark square, you take there, d6, queen takes there. The number of pawns is equal, but white is better because black pieces are not developed, and black also lost their castling privilege. Quite a common idea. Well, and they cannot save with queen f6. This time you play e5, and after they take, it's over. So it's simple. Well, you may say, but of course there are some strong chess players who understand that bishop c5 here doesn't allow black to save the pawn. What if, for example, d6 is played? Well, if d6 is played, take on d4, and after that you get a uh, Philidor defense, where black played h6, which doesn't make sense. So white is just one tempo up. Well, knight f6 you can take there, and then open the position with e5. So d takes e5. Well, if they don't play d takes e5, for example, they continue with knight g4, you may continue even with e6 with the idea to break the connection between these two pieces and capture on g4 for free. So I don't know what they can do, maybe knight e5, but you still take on f7. And if they take, then you have bishop f7. If king takes, you successfully gain the queen. If king goes to e7, then, well, let's take, and then just take advantage of our better pawn structure. The number of pawns is equal, but these pawns are isolated. Well, that was d6. What about that move, which is also natural? This time it's e5. And knight g4 here is a terrible mistake because of h3, and the pawn on e5 cannot be captured. I'll show you. And after d6, just f4, taking advantage of the pin. So knight g4 doesn't work. Instead, what? d5. Okay, d5. Who knows what should we do after d5 is played? By the first glance, it makes sense to capture on d6, but maybe you can suggest a better move. Hi to everyone who joined us today, and we are going to we are talking about basic concepts and principles that you should follow when your opponent doesn't play the opening properly, or he just plays something really weird. So the first principle that you should learn, if your opponent plays the move that can be considered as a tempo loss, you should open the position right away. So who knows? Rook e1. Well, rook e1, interesting move, but I don't think it works. Rook e1, they take there, you take there, they play bishop e6. Knight g5 here doesn't work because of h6. So no, not this move. It's bishop b5 here. The best move is bishop b5. You create a pin, the knight has to move. For example, if it goes there, you just take. You just take there, pawn takes, and knight takes d4, so you're threatening to take here. And if knight e5, it's rook e1, of course. If c5, you can play either e6 or knight c6. Both moves are good. If bishop b7, then I think e6 works pretty well. And then queen h5, so they are in a trouble. King e7. So probably knight e4 is the best option. Then knight takes d4, bishop d7. You take on c6 with the bishop, pawn takes on c6. And with f3 you can chase the knight away. Then f4 maybe. Well, it's a good position where you have a strong pawn center, your opponent is still not developed, and you are trying to do something like that to expose the king. Another thing you can do is to play e6 still, and after that continue with queen h5. This is where you have a compensation, but the line I suggested before with f3 is stronger. Okay, so let's go back to the original position and repeat the main concept. If you think your opponent loses a tempo and you lead in development, take advantage of extra tempo by initiating a pawn exchange in the center or closer to the center in order to get better pieces coordination and ideally to attack the enemy king being in the center. If the king is castled, it still may be okay. Okay. What if your opponent plays really something weird? And to demonstrate it, I'm going to explain how I play against such a weird opening like Polish opening, or some people may know it as Sokolski opening, named by famous Polish master. So, before looks like a weird move, and most of you here would continue with e5, and this is where you should learn something. Your opponent, if he plays a weird opening, plays it not for the first time. He has a lot of experience there, and he is likely to know what exactly to react for such common and natural moves like e5 or, for example, d5. So let's say e5, bishop b2, bishop b4, bishop e5, then what, knight f6, let's say. So this is a playable position for black, and it's definitely good, and even e5 is considered to be the strongest reaction to b4, but this is what your opponent knows. So if someone starts the game against you with a weird move, with unsound opening, you have two options again. You have two options. What are they? One of them is to play naturally and maybe later somehow take advantage of his weird moves. Maybe you'll get this chance. However, I would recommend the second option. Play also good and developing moves, but the moves that your opponent is unfamiliar. For example, like I suggest here, c6. Well, c6 is also a natural move. It fights for the center, for the d5 square. So, however, it's not so common, and people who plays b4 usually don't know how to react against c6. Bishop b2. Why did I play c6? I wanna play queen b6. Looks like also a tempo loss, but this time we are trying to grab the pawn. a3, of course a3, what else? And then you play a5, trying to take advantage of the pin. What your opponent can do here? Well, some may play c3, but look at this ugly bishop on b2. This is where you can start with this or that, or with knight f6 at least. Then the concept of Polish opening no longer makes sense. Bishop on b2 becomes really bad. So c3 is unlikely to be played. Maybe this move, well, maybe, take, bishop takes. Well, if the pawn takes, you can take the rook and then capture on b4, gaining the pawn. So bishop takes, c5, bishop retreats, and d5, threatening with d4, which traps the bishop. You get the control over the center with your pawns, and at the same time you gain tempers. So let's say they play this move. How would you play in this position? Please let me know if there is a lag in streaming. Well, yeah, it should be fine. So knight c6. Well, knight c6 is a nice move, but then e3 can be played. So what else? Knight c6 still. Any other suggestions? Well, e5, and if he takes, you play that, and if he goes there, you play that, gaining the rook. Well, not the rook. Knight c3, you take there, gaining the knight. That's why they cannot take on e5. They may take on c5. This is how they attack your queen. Bishop c5. You're threatening to take there on f2. So e3. Then up to you. Maybe knight c6. But look how strong how strong your center is. Maybe you will also consider d4 in this position. Okay, so what else? e3, c takes d4, e takes d4, knight c6. And if d takes e5, it's still this. If knight f3, then e4, and the knight has to move. Well, of course, if it's a strong player playing with white pieces, instead of bishop c3, he will play c4. A takes b4 doesn't gain a pawn. Well, if they take, yes, it does. You take the rook, then you take on b4. But here, white may play this move, which is a tricky trap. If now queen takes on c5, a takes b4, and both pieces are under the attack. But of course, we shouldn't take. We may retreat to c7. And after a takes b4, exchange rooks. And then continue with knight a6, which is actually a move that attacks both pawns. So they need to save the pawn, maybe with this move, in such a case where the knight goes. And now you may continue with d6, fighting for the center. For example, c takes d6, queen d6, then you play e5. Also b4 is hanging. And if they play d4, you can play even e5. Like that. If he takes there, you take there. If they take there, you take with the bishop. If he takes there, you can probably take on b4. E5 is a weakness. So, bishop c3 is a mistake. This move. d6 still. C takes d6, queen takes d6. So this is a weakness. If instead they play that move, which is natural, just develop your pieces, threaten with this move, this pawn is a weakness. Every time they'll decide to push it, you'll get an option to either take on c5 or continue with queen a5 check. Let me show you. So maybe e3, knight d5, bishop goes there, you take, and after this move, you can continue with queen a5 attacking the bishop. And if bishop c3, you just take it. They take there, you deliver a check, and then win the game. King goes there, it's a mate. If king goes there, it's a fork. If king goes there, knight f2. If there is no better move. Okay. So, c takes d6. Or maybe c takes d6 here, queen d6. And the pawn on b4 becomes a weakness. If b5 is played, you may take, getting a passed pawn on the b file, or just continue with a tempo move knight c5. So bishop c3, protecting it, e5, and you are also attacking it with one more piece, with the bishop this time. Knight f3, e4, knight goes there, then you finally take and end up with extra pawn. So, what I want you to learn, if your opponent plays a weird opening, don't play the most common response, but think how else you can play in order to still locate your pieces properly and fight for the center, as well as to create some problems to your opponent, like I demonstrated here with c6 against b4. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask them. Okay, and then we continue. We continue with more complex content. And this time I would like to talk about French defense. So I played French defense for 15 years because my coach played French defense, and that was the only thing he could taught me. Well, but then later I realized that I'm actually a Sicilian player. I prefer open Sicilians, and I feel quite comfortable there. Rather than in French defense. But French is also a tactical opening, so I know it a lot. And if, for example, you ask me about my second favorite opening for black, I would suggest French defense. So, what's the point? Knight f6 is a natural move, e5, and everyone here plays that move, knight fd7. However, my coach invented this move, knight g8. He is 2137 FIDE rated. So he is actually a strong candidate master. He doesn't have a FIDE title, but well, he has a Russian title, so it's candidate master. So what was the idea of this move? And what's the difference between knight g8 and knight d7? This is where I want you to think. So let's assume you are e4 player and you play against French defense a lot. Now, what are the disadvantages of knight g8 move comparing to knight fd7, and how we should take advantage of them? So please think and suggest. This is important, and I want you to do the analysis yourself and then suggest it. Just some basic things that you are that you see here by the first glance. What's wrong with knight g8 move? And while you're thinking, I will tell you what my coach had in mind when he played that move. Well, he played this move because he thought that the knight is more helpful on e7 rather than on d7, where it's originally placed. So he either develops the knight to e7 or h6. Well, on h6 the knight can be captured, the pawns are double, so it's a rare case, but knight e7 and knight f5, that was his plan. So ideally he wanted to reach something like that. I'll show you. Knight e2, f6, pawn takes, queen takes, knight f3, bishop d6, castle, knight e7, and he thought that this is better comparing to the original line when the knight is here. And well, let's say this. Oh, sorry, not this. Then knight e2, f6, pawn takes, queen takes. Most people here take with the knight, you know. It's the queen move is considered to be dangerous. The queen becomes the object of the attack. So knight f3, bishop d6, castle, bishop g5, queen f7, bishop h4, threatening with a fork. So the queen is the object of the attack. So that's why here it's better to take with the knight. But if you look at this position, wait a sec, where it is? This position. Here probably it's not a big problem because the knight can move to g6 or the knight can move to f5 and successfully block this light square bishop. So that was his original intention. Okay, now I go back to this position and I'm going to read your comments. So white is more developed and have better center. That's right, but well, even if knight fd7 is played, white is still better developed and have a strong center. Okay, so let's look at what Anirudh suggests. So on g8 you went backwards with development, yes. So the point of this move is that the light squared bishop is not blocked? No, that's not the point of knight g8 move. I explained the point of knight g8 move. It's to locate the knight on e7. Okay, what else do we have? Okay, delay development. Okay, so John suggests f4 for white and working for a 5 breakout later on the king side. That makes sense. But John, when you suggest it, you should consider knight, well, let's say f4, knight h6. He stops it. So, you see? Well, yes, maybe because of better development you should play for that, but it's definitely not the best option to take advantage of knight g8. Okay, so first of all, to understand what's wrong with this move, you should look at the options that the knight have. So these two. The knight on h6 can be captured with the bishop, but you shouldn't play pawn to f4 in such a case. The knight on e7 doesn't allow this bishop to get developed. So that is the point. It's hard to develop both pieces to e7. This is the main disadvantage. Also, the knight on d7 was attacking the e5 square. So that's why in that original variation, white has no other choice but to take. Oh, f4 is a disaster. F takes, knight takes d4, knight takes d4, queen h4. So no, that doesn't work. That's why here white takes. But when the knight is on g8, maybe we don't need to take. And that offers more options for white. So let's, how would I exploit this mistake? So e5 is not hanging, and it's difficult to develop the knight to h6, and the knight on e7 will be blocking the bishop, what means more lag in development for black. So I would play either bishop d3 or c3 in this position. Let's say c3, c5, bishop d3, knight c6, knight e2, and f6. Well, if we take, they take with the queen, and they apply the main idea. If we take and they take with the knight, then this is the position from the main variation. So if we want to take advantage of the knight being on g8, we should play something else. Well, some people suggest here f4, because there is, well, f4, take, still knight d4 doesn't look good. But instead you may take with the d pawn, however, then bishop c5, and you cannot castle. So f4 doesn't seem like a good idea. What should you do? Well, this time, when there is no knight on d7, you don't need to protect the pawn on e5 a lot. You just need to bring one more knight. And if they take on d4, you should think twice whether you take with the pawn and do like you usually do in such variations, or you may take advantage of his undeveloped pieces. I would even play this. Why? If pawn takes, I play knight c6 and take on e5 with the idea of that. Anyway, with the knight in the center, I successfully block his pawns and attack c6. Here you may say, what if he takes with the knight? Well, it's possible, but then knight takes e5, pawn takes, and you can play queen h6. And then take on e5 with the queen chasing the king away. If he does that move, bishop takes, pawn takes, you take there, gaining the exchange. And if he takes on d4, you also take his knight on g8, getting a winning position. So if c takes d4 now, you can take with the knight, and the pawn on e5 cannot be captured. Okay, what if they capture on e5 right away? Because in French defense usually black has a lack of space, not enough room to maneuver with their pieces, we shouldn't exchange them. D takes e5. Let's say they continue with queen c7. Castle. So when you lead in development, you can even sacrifice a pawn for the initiative. And here it's obvious from a naked eye, like knight takes e5, knight takes knight, queen takes, you play rook e1, the queen has to move, and at the same time he needs to develop his pieces. Let's say he does that, you play this, knight d4, queen goes there, but knight b5, taking advantage of the pin. If the queen goes somewhere, you play that, and there is a weakness on c7. Queen goes to b8, but bishop g5. So you're threatening to take and continue with queen h5, and I don't know how to defend it. Let's say a6, queen here, and if they take, we take on f6, and after that just continue with bishop b5. Well, this is the only move, but queen e6 and queen takes d7. So queen c7 and knight takes e5 doesn't work. What if instead they just keep developing their pieces and apply their original idea with knight to e7? Well, knight f4. And if knight f5, you take and take on d5. How to play? If this time knight e5, what do you think you should do? Okay, who knows? h4, Darius suggested. h4, what for? Can you explain it, please? Okay. So here, the best way to take advantage of this move is actually to threaten e6. For such purposes, you can play this move, and if they block on d7, you take on e6. So I don't think they should move the king. Let's say they decide to block with the knight, maybe this move. But then knight takes e5, queen takes e5, and you take on d5 because of the pin. Okay, what if this knight? Then you can just continue with rook e1 on knight g5 here. And take the pawn on e6 successfully. Okay, fine. So knight e7 and knight e4. So they still cannot take on e5. g6. This is what I suggest them to play to develop the bishop. But it's still a mistake. Well, this time you continue with either knight g5 or rook e1. Well, let's say rook e1. Rook e1, they play this, you play that, and this is still a weakness that is hard to protect. So if he castles after... No, then h4, h5 actually seems to be good. I was also looking at this move. Then queen e5, let's say. Knight takes e6. Well, I am sure it favors white. So rook goes there, then maybe knight takes there. Knight takes c5 actually is better. Another move is bishop f4. So looks like we have a lot of options. So bishop f4, queen takes there, rook takes there, and there are two threats. So One of the options is just to keep the pawn on e5 and not take. However, you should also consider what else can be done. What else can be done with knight on g8? Well, let me show you something. So here c3, your opponent may continue with queen d7 with the idea to exchange the light squared bishops. Bishop d3, b6, knight e2, bishop a6, and you simply play bishop c2. So you avoid the exchange because this bishop is more helpful. It attacks on the king side, and then you castle. This knight is pinned, but who cares? And queen d7 is actually important move, because if the same thing is played without queen d7, let's say b6, bishop d3, bishop a6, you take, and with this check gain a knight. So queen d7 should be played in advance. Oh, there is a game that I want to show you. However, the move order was slightly different here. Knight d instead of that move, knight df3 was played, which I don't recommend, but actually the move is okay. b6, c3, queen d7, bishop d3, bishop a6, bishop c2, c5, knight e2, so white can castle, knight c6, castle. So finally we got the same position as we usually get in the line that I suggest. For example, c3, queen d7, bishop d3, b6, knight e2. Here, bishop comes there, they play c5, you castle, they play knight c6, and you get the same position. So starting from this position, let's say knight g7, rook e1. Well, it's hard to develop the king side, that's why in that game black decided to castle queen side. a3 with the idea to open the position there. c4. Looks like the position is closed, but the bishop is useless. Knight f4, and white tries to attack the main weaknesses. King b8, knight g5. Knight g6, looks like the pawn is protected, but it's still the object of the attack. Knight takes knight, and queen comes to g4 to attack there. h6. So if knight takes, it's bishop c8. That's why queen h3, keeping pressure and pinning the pawn. Bishop c8 protecting it. But g6 is now a weakness. And now knight f7 is a threat. So knight e7, bishop f7, threatening to take there. And black had to sacrifice the exchange, and after that they resigned. So you see, if you play bishop c2, the bishop on e6 is not doing much. And the best is probably just to take on e2. But white is still better there. Okay, the second game I would like to illustrate is queen b6 move. So queen b6 in case if, well, it's something similar to the advanced variation, but this time white plays with extra tempo. Knight f3, bishop d7, so the d4 is well protected, castle, knight g7, and if you play French defense, you probably know that here you should ruin your pawn chain and take on c5. If they take with the queen, it's b4, the knight on e2, this extra move, can go to d4 later in the game, but or it can also go to f4. Knight g6, you can take on g6 and continue your pawn march like that. So this is where white is better, with more space on the queen side, and there is no attack on the king side for black. If queen doesn't take, and queen c7 like it was played in the game with the idea to attack on e5, you play bishop f4, knight g6, take with the bishop to keep the pawn alive, and with b4 you finally get an extra pawn. Well, g5, to attract the knight, but to take the pawn on e5. However, knight d4 with the idea of rook e1. Bishop takes there, bishop takes e5. Well, the game ended soon, but even here, white is already +7. They also take on g7. There is no attack at all, and white is just dominated on both flanks. Okay, let's go back. So after knight g8, almost any black strategy doesn't work if you play properly and if you understand the disadvantages of this move and advantages of this move, knight fd7. So the main advantage of this move is that the knight is attacking e5. The fact that it blocks the bishop is not so important here. Okay, so before we continue, I would like to check if there are any questions. One more thing I wanted to tell you. So when you learn the openings, it's not enough just to remember the move order. You should understand the position, why this move is played. So every time you play it, you should ask yourself, why I play such a move. For example, why do you play bishop d3 here? Well, this bishop, it's the only square. First and second, it's to attack h7. Why you play knight to e2 in this position? Well, it's because if you play knight to f3, it will be difficult to find a good spot for that knight. But the one is on e2, the other one is on f3, and it generally looks okay. So when you learn the opening, I kindly recommend you to play several rapid games to feel the position and then of course analyze them either yourself or with a coach. Better with the coach who is experienced in this opening. Okay, now the next example, how I prepared against international master Berlius Zlatanovic. However, before we continue, I would like to remind you that you have an option to book a trial class with any of our coaches. For example, if you go to the main page of our website, chesslands.com, here you can choose schedule your free chess lesson. It's a 20-minute class where you can choose your the coach that you would like. For example, let's say you choose international master Berlius Zlatanovic. This is the time available. My time zone, actually my time zone is Asia, Almaty here. So you choose your time zone here. Usually it's chosen automatically, and then you, for example, click, let's say here, enter your name and proceed to the payment. Well, it's absolutely free. We charge $2. Well, we don't charge, we freeze $2, and after a few days this amount is returned to your card back. So it's absolutely free. This is required only to confirm your intention to have a class, because well, if you offer something for free, some people book and then completely forget about it. So here you pay, but in a few days, even before the class, the money are returned to you back. Okay, so I'm going to share this link with you, and let's now continue with with our topic today. Okay, so I analyzed several of his games. I was playing with white. That was actually the first round, but I knew that I was going to play against him, so I prepared. He is known as a good French defense player. Knight c3, bishop b4, win our variation. I was ready for almost anything, but this is where he plays b6, which is a kind of a deviation. course, a3. And now this is quite a rare move. Here the main concept is that the bishop has to return back. Otherwise, this b6 move doesn't make sense. So if they take, b6 is just a tempo loss because white continues with queen g4 and attacks on g7. So they go back to f8. Now queen g4 no longer makes any sense. What do you think how you should take advantage of the b6 move and the fact that the bishop retreated back? So they spent 2 tempers and didn't achieve anything with this bishop. White played a3, which is not actually a helpful move. But a3 is only 1 temper. Bishop b4 and bishop f8 back, 2 tempers. So white leads in development. But right now, you cannot open the position. Maybe later you can do this, but it's too slow. So what comes to your mind? I'm checking your suggestions. To be honest, I actually analyzed this line. So maybe if I were playing this game and that was the first time I saw bishop f8, probably I wouldn't fully take advantage of this weird move order, and the position could be approximately equal. But I read a book about this move. Well, I read the book, and this move was mentioned there as not the best option, and it was illustrated how white achieves a comfortable position. However, during the game, I completely forgot how exactly to play and did some weird things. But at least I didn't allow him to apply his main idea. Well, knight f3, of course, but then knight e7. This is what he played. So bishop d3. I spent a tempo move. I spent the tempo on bishop d3, and they play bishop a6. Here, the key option is how exactly to react. The key issue. So, of course, exchanging this bishop for that bishop definitely favors black, and they are fine after that. But exchanging the bishop for a knight doesn't favor them, and they cannot play c6, you enter d6. That's why he played knight c8 with the idea of c6 then. And now, what do you think white should do? Look, this tempo, this knight tempo, and the knight is still not developed. White played bishop d3 and knight b5. Well, maybe knight b5 is not a move that develops white pieces, but knight e7 and knight c8 are already 2 tempers. So a question for you guys is how to react. Well, the question for you, and especially for Anirudh, how exactly white should play in this position. Okay, if there are any issues with booking or attending classes at Chesslands, please message me at school.TheChessWorld.com. Aha, so finally Anirudh is correct about his c4 move. Yes, so Anirudh suggests that while there are so many tempi losses, maybe c4 to try to open the position. Yes, exactly. You play c4 to open the position. c6, what else? Because if he plays, well, d takes c4, you may play this move, if I'm not mistaken. So if d takes c4, you play that move, he plays c6. After which you can continue with, well, it's actually the same position. It's the same position that could be played later. So c4, c6, knight retreats, and I was expecting him to play that bishop e4 with the idea of knight g5. So he has to play this move, castle, knight e7, still almost no development for black. Then bishop e3, knight d5, and knight d2 with the idea of capturing the pawn on c4 then. So I'm okay if he takes, because opening the f file favors white. This is what I expected to play. But he took with the bishop. Well, this move maybe is even better, because white gets rid of their bad bishop. So bishop takes c4, d takes c4. And here I completely forgot that my plan was to castle, with the idea of transposing to queen's gambit. So it's Slav defense of queen's gambit, where white is quite comfortable. The pawn on c4 is lost. They cannot hold it. And this pawn is already on e5. So every time b5 is played, it's chased with a4. No, well, I can show you. For example, b5, a4, I'm threatening to take, and a6 here doesn't work. a6, take, then knight takes, and the a pawn is pinned. So what? Queen b6 or b4? If b4, knight comes there, and the c4 is even more a weakness. I can continue with that, this, queen e2, and finally take it. If queen b6, then bishop e3 maybe. With the idea of d5. So now holding the pawn was definitely a better idea. And if not, if they just develop pieces naturally, I continue with that, take that pawn, play knight e4, try to exchange these bishops with bishop g5, and enter the enemy camp on d6. That was my plan. What happened in the game? I forgot that castle was the best option and played bishop e3, knight e7, knight g5. So with two ideas, to go there as well as to threaten f7. h6, this is where I should retreat, but I played that move. And for g6, I prepared knight g4 with the idea of a mate in one. So I sacrifice the queen. If he takes, it's a mate in one. And this is where I completely missed this move. However, I don't lose anything there. For example, check, king goes there, and queen goes there. After, let's say, knight d7, I can just retreat to e4 and still get to d6. So this is approximately equal position. But I spent too many moves with my knights. So he played that, knight d5 to cover the f6, queen retreated to e2, bishop e7, queen takes there, and this is where he played queen c8, with the idea of queen e6 and exchange the queens, probably, I'm not sure. What do you think I should do now? Queen c8 is also a weird move. How can I take advantage of it? So what comes to your mind? queen need to, no, not here. Okay, thanks, John. It's knight b5. You are absolutely right. So it's knight b5 with the idea of knight d6 because I'm attacking it with two knights. Well, he has no other choice but to castle, and I can't take the pawn on h6 because his queen is now protected, so my knight is hanging. I played that. Knight e3 is intermediate attack of my queen, so I have to take. This line doesn't work. Then my knight is trapped. And my b2 pawn is hanging, so if I play that, it's probably this. So that's why I took on e3. Queen e6 to exchange. Well, it could make sense to retreat maybe there. I played that move, attacking on g6. So c5. Finally, I took advantage of his weird development. I got a strong center and I enter it with my knights into his camp. I also weakened his king's position. What do you think I should do in order to take advantage of the benefits of my position? Because after that, in 5-6 moves, I lost all advantage and then he started outplaying me. Castle queenside. Castle queenside. That's right. You cannot castle kingside because of that. But actually, I wanted to castle kingside. I was considering this move here. And so, yeah, you see, because of the queen. Well, if only white castles kingside, they are absolutely winning here. But the best move is to castle queenside. So let me show you what was happened in the game first. I played that. He played knight c6. I played with my king. That was too slow. It was an artificial castling. But that was too slow. And here I'm still fine. The position is slightly better for me. I could continue with this move. But I played d4 and didn't realize that his queen enters my territory and d4 is hanging. So let's go back to the moment where rook f1 was played. That was a wrong plan, my mistake. Instead, castle queenside. If he wants to take advantage of that, he has to take, but that's fine. Rook c8 is not possible because of the knight here. So knight d7. Now rook c8 is possible, but I can still block on c3. Take once and then block on c3. So king to b1. And this is where white is absolutely dominating. So f6 has to be covered. And if bishop takes there, I take with my knight. This knight has no moves at all. Only back to b8. And if they play that move, I can continue with rook hf1 with the idea to pressure here. I can also sacrifice on f7 with the idea to take on g6 in some variations. If they play, let's say, this move, then knight c5, the queen is trapped. Like that. So, you see, he has to keep the knight there. So, for example, rook b8, queen d2, king g7, and I can play on both flanks. His pieces are ugly. I can play this move, but I think I would prefer something like that, or maybe that to pressure here. So white is much better in this position. Well, it was a difficult example for masters mainly, but that illustrates what you should do. So I think that my opponent was surprised with knight b5. Of course, he knew that such a move exists, but he didn't expect me to play knight b5. So with b6, he only wants to exchange the bishops, and with bishop d3, knight b5, I don't allow him to do this. In order to apply the original idea, he has to spend one more move with the knight to c8 and then c6. But then I open the position with c4 and transpose it even to queen's gambit. So originally the game should be continue with this position. Well, I played that move, it's not a mistake, then decided to apply some counterattack. The main thing that I did here, I provoked and I provoked weaknesses on f6 and replaced my knight to e4 to enter the d6. Okay, so this is what I prepared for you today. What are your questions? My main concept is that when you learn the opening, you should be ready for deviations. How? Well, to be ready for that, you should not only learn the move order, but understand the positions that you play, and understand the opening. You should, every time you make the move and your opponent makes the move, when you learn the opening, you should ask yourself why this or that move is played for. Like it was in the previous example. So why do people play knight fd7 here? Why nobody plays knight? Almost nobody plays knight g8. It's probably because the knight is not attacking e5, or maybe if the knight goes there, the bishop doesn't go there. So what's the concept? Not enough pressure on e5, but the knight on g8 doesn't block the bishop. So maybe this is what black may favor. So these are these are your thoughts. So learn the opening, play it, then if you see something weird, analyze it to make a better understanding of the opening you play. Okay, there is a question from Brendan about the knight tandem. So what's the question? What is the main file? Well, I actually don't understand such a question. What do you mean by saying the file? It's the F file. Yes, in the position I got, it's the F file and the pressure through it. The position should be something like that, with the pressure through the F file, and it would be quite hard for them to defend. The other strategy, instead of attacking the king side, because of no c8 square available, I can play this move, double the rooks there, and enter the c7 square. That is also quite dangerous. Okay, so I'm waiting for your questions, and so by the end of the webinar, let me again demonstrate our online chess school's website. So I've already told you how to schedule your free chess lesson. It's a 20-minute lesson, and if you have any special requests, you can message me at school@chesslands.com and of course schedule it first. Or if you're looking for a 1-hour class, then click here, book your lesson. Choose your coach, choose your time zone if it's not set automatically. Then choose your coach, who you want to work, like Julian Yet and Nikolai Yordanov. So there are a lot of players, for example, international master David Fitzsimons from Ireland. Then choose the time that suits you well, let's say this. enter your name, last name, and click proceed to payment. How does it work? 15 minutes before the class, a Zoom link is sent to you, and you enter a Zoom conference with the coach, where you can discuss what you should study. The coach may analyze your games first and or suggest what exactly you should do to get improved. So let me send you this link. To chat. If you have any other questions, you are welcome. How do we understand the main concept of the opening you play? Well, to understand the concept of the opening, you should learn it properly. You should understand why this or that move is played. And when you understand it, when we understand it, we also understand what should we do in case if something weird happens on the board instead of natural things that you got used to. So that was the answer. To be more comfortable with the openings, I ask you to play more games. So, for example, if you are a club player, I suggest you to play rapid, 15 plus 10 rapid. If you are, let's say, 2200 player, I suggest you to play rapid and blitz games, but play a lot. And if you think that your opponent played something weird but you didn't take advantage of it, analyze this game with the engine, with the coach, or with anybody else, even with your opponent, to make sure you know how to react on this or that move, and to understand the reason why you didn't find a proper solution during the game. So just play more and analyze to be better with the opening you choose. Okay, guys, thank you for your attention. And I also would like to remind you that next week there is a masterclass. Our coach, international master Mauricio Santana, by the way. Let me show you coaches. So this guy, Mauricio Santana, is conducting a masterclass. This masterclass is it's a coaching session limited to a small group of people. So it starts at 11 a.m. on Saturday. 2 hours on Saturday and 2 hours on Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. He is going to explain how you should improve your calculation ability. So how to think like a master when you calculate, how to not spend much time on calculation, and what exactly to calculate. So I invite everybody there, and I am also going to send a mailing for you, so you decide whether you want to join. But actually, I think that he is one of the best coaches of our school. You can learn a lot from him. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Niels plays e4 and Vienna opening. I also played it when I was younger, but only a few players react properly. So you should play a lot and analyze the games where your opponent doesn't react properly. This is the plan. Okay, so there is also a message by Mary Carr. I usually don't play rapid games. What do you recommend them for? So why do I recommend rapid games? Well, and what type of games do you usually play? Do you only play blitz games, or do you only play standard games with, let's say, 1 hour per game, or 1 hour, 90 minutes per game? Why do I recommend rapid games? Because this is a good opportunity for you to train the opening, to feel the positions that because, well, let's say you are an e4 player, so you have to learn a lot of openings, and to learn them you should play them a lot. If you play with a standard time control, you just don't have enough time to play so many games. If you play with rapid time control, you at the same time have enough time to think and to find the solution of what to do in case if your opponent doesn't play according to the main line. And rapid game time control allows you to play more, so more games, and more weird situation will happen that you will analyze after the game, so you will be prepared for such situations during the tournament. So Medicare plays standard or 3 days per move. Well, so you should play rapid games just to achieve a quantity of the game. So play a lot, because with rapid time control, you are, well, if you spend, let's say, 3 hours per day for chess, you may play 10 games, let's say, and analyze them. 10 games and analyze them all. Okay, guys, thank you for attending, and see you next week. I'm not going to do any webinar, but Mauricio Santana will conduct a masterclass that I kindly recommend you to join. Thank you for watching, and see you. That was FIDE Master Viktor Neustroyev.